But let's get this party started, shall we?
Hey, please do. I mean, so I mean, like we know each other, but what made you accept this invitation about coming to Tummler School?
Okay, so well, first of all, the reason we know each other is it's a Barry Island connection, isn't it? So I was
Absolutely.
head teacher at Barry Island Primary School from the year 2000 through to 2011, and during that time, we had a dream that perhaps that piece of land that once was Butlins could become something rather more, could become a Sculler Moor, in fact, looking out to sea. It could be a fantastic place where people could gather and learn together, and all sorts of things could happen. The Vale Council were interested, but after we went to quite a bit of effort and pulled together a proposal, then it wasn't of interest at that time. But I think in that time we made such a connection, Andy, didn't we, that
Indeed.
You weren't going to get away from me, and I wasn't going to get away
Well,
from you.
we've invented a verb to be janeted. So yeah, but a mighty pleasure. So we met in your role as head teacher at Barry Island Junior School. You now sort of got a CV and job description much more complex. So what's on? How would you describe what you're doing at the moment?
Okay, so back in 2011, I actually moved over to Cadoxton Primary School, which is over on the east end of Barry, and things grew there. During that time, I have worked with Welsh Government on the digital agenda, but also grew and grew, I suppose, the community-focused school side of things. Quite a lot over time. I was lucky enough to be nominated in the Varkey Top 50 Teachers back in 2015, I think it was.
So Varkey is that a global thing?
Varkey is a global teacher prize.
Yeah.
Based in Dubai, but out there I was lucky enough to meet a head teacher from Leeds who was doing a lot of work around food, and that resonated with where we wanted to go next in Cadoxton, and really sort of picking up that idea and bringing that food mission back to Cadoxton took us onto the big box project where we are now.
So why is food important, Jam? It's a bit of a blunt question, but I mean, what's the big issue there with food then? Why do we need to do something about it?
So I guess, during this time of COVID, food has really risen to the top of the agenda around food poverty. All of Marcus Rashford's work has been really well received and understood, I guess. But what I'd like to say is that actually this work goes far beyond just food poverty, because food creates a community around it. Food creates purpose around it. Everybody is connected by food, and what we've been able to do in Cadoxton is actually put food front and centre of our curriculum. But if I go right back to my early days in teaching, when I taught on the Longleat estate, it served quite a varied community. I actually lived in the village with the children, with the families, and even there were children who would come to school hungry, who would come to school with perhaps quite a limited diet. And what we were able to do there actually was to wrap food around that community. So a lot of growing food, a lot of understanding how farms worked, taking food from the farm to the fork. And I suppose that in doing that brings more than just the child in the classroom. It brings the family in. So that gave me an understanding from a very early start. But involving parents then, bringing their motivation, bringing their skills and bringing their purpose actually made a difference quite early on.
And why is it important, maybe not just to educate the child, but the family or even the wider neighbourhood and community? Why is that important?
So we are social animals, aren't we? interestingly, on the news this morning, there was a real piece about drugs in Scotland and how Scotland suffers the worst in Europe in terms of drug addiction. And there was a professor talking about the why of this. And actually the why of this is because there are fragmented communities, because everything that happened in the 70s and 80s with communities, with them breaking down, with those extended families not being in place, has led to that kind of social breakdown and people turning to something different. And what we have to create are communities with a sense of purpose. And what food does is it creates that purpose. So if I talk a little bit about the Big Box Boy project from the beginning. So
how did it
as
start?
I said, yeah. So I met Nathan Atkinson out in Dubai.
That's a Leeds teacher, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the Leeds head teacher, and what he'd done in Leeds was he had noticed that children were coming to school hungry, and he'd noticed that it doesn't take much to spot, does it? A hungry child is going to be a child who's not going to thrive, who's not going to be able to learn. And what he was able to do through a connection was to see that supermarket food that was going to be thrown away, he could get into school. He could use for snacks for children in school, that they could create their own snacks. But as well as that, he managed to create a pay-as-you-feel shop for parents outside his school gates. Back that summer in Cadoxton, we'd been able to take over, I say in the loosest terms, our community centre that actually is on our school grounds, and set up a charity around that called Cadoc's Corner. So Cadoc's Corner was actually set up with the mission to support the Cadoxton community in the wider sense, in terms of learning and growing, in terms of making our community the best that it could be. But Cadoc's Corner actually moved in on the management committee of that community centre. So what we were able to do with the community centre, with Cadoc's Corner, was to use the community centre during the day as a place for all sorts of activity. So training for parents, for all sorts of groups, for the wider community as well. And we had our family engagement, Tash Cockram, move into that place and really work with parents. And very quickly we had planned activity, but also we had drop-in kind of coffee shop activity as well. So really that community centre became a place that created community and engaged community and allowed community to flourish. So alongside that, we had the pay-as-you-feel shop, but also we had the children running their junk food cafe every Friday. The food that came in, they repurposed and sold.
So, yeah. And you mentioned pay as you feel. What does that mean?
So pay as you feel means, my greatest example of all is that, and we've grown this now, so that food comes in from Fairshare on a Friday. So the kind of food that comes is incredible. But my favourite thing that has ever come in through Fairshare are scallops. Frozen scallops.
Wow.
That used in all sorts of ways. We have food from the Ivy, we have food from Pret-a-Manger, and really we also have asparagus and all sorts of fruit and vegetables that perhaps our families wouldn't be used to using, but really using them in a aspirational, ambitious way in their cooking. So that's the kind of food that comes in. But paying as you feel means that if you aren't able to contribute to the shop, that's fine. If you're able to give £5 towards a bag of scallops, that's fine too. You give what you feel you can contribute. So yes, and I can see there's a question in the chat
Yeah,
there
but yeah,
already.
do you grow from Jackie there? Do you grow your own food in the grounds as well?
Yes, we do. So that is growing all of the time, literally. So of course the bit of the story that I've left out is that the shop within the community centre grew and grew, sharing that community space with bingo ladies and dancing ladies kind of became a bit unmanageable. So that's where the idea of a shipping container came from. I'd seen Brand Designs, Kevin MacLeod building houses out of shipping containers, so I thought, well, a shop might work. So we were able to come up with the idea. What we were lucky to have is Hannah Cogbill, who's on the call
Hannah's
today.
with us, yeah.
Is a teacher here. She's just put into the chat the Big Box Boyd website, actually. But Hannah is a teacher at Cadixton who is especially passionate about this project. But her dad, Hugh, is incredible. He's a retired chief of policeman and has incredible skills. So when we started talking about how on earth do you actually convert a shipping container, he was the person who had all of the ideas, but also had all of the know-how of how to do it and was up for doing it. So, you know, a huge hero of this project is Hannah's dad, Hugh.
But is that a wonderful? So is that a wonderful example, though, that if you've got a problem, if you don't know, there's either someone around you who may know, or someone they might know. Again, this wonderful power of connections, social capital, and going through all this. So, you know, if you'd have said, right, who's the expert on converting a shipping container in Cadixton, you'd have struggled. But with one or two connections there, wasn't that? It's a wonderful example. So that brings it alive then. So it's not just Hannah's dad, but what sort of other people have been getting involved?
So we have an array of school staff,
yeah.
But we also have volunteers. So parents who've come in, and perhaps people who felt socially isolated along the way. You know, a number of parents as well who said that they didn't feel good enough to be part of the school team. But by being involved with this project, they've received training, but they've become part of that family. And we do call the Cadixton family, but also this time, well, just before this time last year, I'd also moved over to Oakfield Primary School in Gibbons Down in Barry. So I'm executive head across the two now, but we set up a similar shipping container there that then opened in September. So the two shops were really up and going by September, but with the learning going across as well, the two schools. So a lot of learning to do with cooking and growing food, really unpicking the why of why we need our children to be food literate, but why we need our families to be food literate as well. We worked with the Teaching and Learning Partnership, TLP, in West Wales. Wendy Thomas is a director, and she's developed a lot of the learning resources that are on the website with us as well. A lot of her time has gone into this for free. But when you think about our new curriculum in Wales, what we want our children to be are, we want them to be ambitious, capable learners. We want them to be healthy and confident. We want them to be ethically informed, and we want them to be enterprising and creative. And this project is about that. It's also about eco schools. It's about healthy schools. It's about future generations. So what we're doing in all of this is pulling together our whole school communities to enable everybody to be part of that mission and to understand what that mission is, whilst making everybody healthier, more confident, and bringing their skills and their purpose together.
So, Jeremy, it sounds a wonderful example. Become a bit of a cliche of like joined up thinking, but this is wonderful because it's so many different boxes, so many different dimensions it addresses. So, I understand you then approached Welsh Government and the scheme expanded. Is that right?
So the funding for the second box actually came from the Waterloo Foundation. The first box at Cadoxton was very much, I'd say we begged, we borrowed, we stole, we did all sorts of fundraising to get that one off the ground. When I moved across to Oakfield, I went directly to the Waterloo Foundation and said, can you just help us do this? And incredibly, by the end of the week, the check was written so that we could begin work over last summer holidays. In preparing an evaluation for them last October half term, they quickly came back and said, gosh, is this something that you think could be replicated? And I said, well, yes, I think it could. It really fits into what schools are about right now. It fits into what communities are about right now. In putting that proposal together as to how things could be replicated, I spoke to Lee Waters, who both you and I know, during that.
Lee's a former governor, wasn't it, Barry Island? Yeah.
He was a former governor. He's now an AM in charge of, or should I say MS? I'm sorry, in charge of sustainability in Welsh government. But he was connected to the Valleys Regional Park project that are looking to put into place some really impactful projects in different parts of the valleys. And he asked whether I could help put 5 across the valleys. So I think that was October half term. So, end of October, beginning of November. By January, the 5 sites had been identified and the boxes were in place by March. So we're up to 12 boxes now across Wales, one way or another. The early evaluation of them is quite astounding, really, in terms of the way that they're being seen by schools, but also in the way that they're being seen by the families that they serve as well. And I suppose it's a story of a bit of hope, a bit of belief and ambition and continuing growth. But yes, it's an education project, but it's also a health project. It's a social justice project. It really takes a sustainability agenda as well. So I suppose to say project is almost wrong. It's a philosophy, because it's going to look different in every school that it touches. I was just talking this morning to a head teacher in Llandilo. And in Llandilo, they're looking to not use a shipping container for their shop. They have a room that they're converting. It's been painted this last. I think I visited it just before the end of term. In that time, it's been emptied out with skips and skips. It's been painted. And it's ready to be converted into a shop now. So we're supporting so many different schools. So there's a project in Penarth that's not connected to a school, but it's really supporting groups of people to have that belief that they can do something incredible and make a difference.
Yeah. So really, I mean, it seems to me you've put in my marketing speak out. You've got a sort of social franchise here that potentially Wales could be a world leader in that schools serve as a community hub for addressing the food agenda. You're building up food wisdom, which in an era of greater obesity and, as you say, food poverty and food waste, it's an incredible asset you've got. So, but I'd imagine, curiously, one challenge you might have is that you tick so many boxes. Is there a danger that you can sort of be confronted with like silo thinking in terms of like the government and public funding that you span so many things? Has that been a challenge? Do you think that could be a challenge for you?
Absolutely. So that was something that struck me in a meeting that I had actually with the Minister for Social Justice. And very quickly she was saying, well, you know, I can see that how this is a health project, and I can see how this is an education project. So yes, it ticks so many boxes that there is that danger that I think, you know, when it comes to government and when it comes to people's thinking, that I think, you know, we want to make things easy, don't we? You know, and people want to be able to label something and tick something off, and really life isn't always that easy. It was interesting again listening to that piece from Scotland this morning, and when the professor started talking about why there was this problem with drugs, of course he had so much to say, but of course the presenter didn't want to hear all of those things. She didn't have time to explore that with him, so very quickly cut him short. And I was so interested to hear it, what he wanted to say. So I think, yes, that is our challenge. You know, we have to use this project, this philosophy, to cut through that siloed thinking, so that people can see that communities need to be far more than just one thing and tick one box. They are what is going to wrap around us as a society. So silo thinking is not helpful here.
Yeah. Now, in our sort of chat beforehand, you mentioned you've got a caravan on the go, which if almost that's a home from home there, and also actually when you get the chance to travel abroad, I mean, you go to the same place, Corfu, where you've been going for a number of years. You know that the families there, you've seen people born and die and so on. That to me suggests actually that this idea of a sense of place is very important to you. Is that the case?
A sense of place is really important to me, and I suppose, you know, over the years, I've unpicked that for me. But I think we are social animals. I think a lot of people would say, why would you go to that same place on holiday year on year? And it is because that's what sings to my heart. And I know that you know, yes, it is and new things, but what we need is that sense of connection, isn't it? That is what feeds us as human beings. So you know, a growing project, a feeding project. One thing that I would like to mention as well, in terms of growing that community and that sense of place, is I think going back to about February and March of this year, we had an ex-pupil of Cadixton get in touch with Hannah in Cadixton, Mike Mitchell, who is the owner now of United Worldwide Logistics in Bridgend. And he could remember growing up in Gibbonsdown and not having enough food, but there'd be a van that would travel around the community, Mrs. Jones's van, and sometimes his mother would have enough money to get onto the van and to get treats and different things for him on a Saturday, and sometimes she wouldn't. He wanted to run a van around the Cadixton and Oakfield, Gibbonsdown communities in that way, but at a pay as you feel kind of way. And I suppose, you know, February, March was a really busy time in schools. We were bringing children back after the last lockdown. It was kind of a little bit mind-blowing. I remember talking to Hannah about it whilst sitting in my hot tub in my garden, trying to just kind of, you know, get ideas straight at the end of the day. How on earth were we going to staff a van, fill a van, enable a route to happen, make sure that the right people were getting onto the van? But we did it. So the Cadfield van now travels every Saturday between Cadixton and Oakfield schools. It serves about 45 families who get on with a bag, a shopper bag with a Cadfield logo on, and they fill it for whatever they can, whatever they need, for £4 if they can. So there's that kind of suggested price, which makes people feel as if it's something that's not being done to them. They are contributing to the project overall. So that has been on the road since Saturday. Since Easter. and goes out every Saturday. It's staffed by staff from Cadoxton and Oakfield schools, all teachers and learning support assistants who've gone out have said how much they've enjoyed being in the community, traveling around the community, seeing the homes that our families are coming out of. And I think COVID has done a lot to enable this as well, for staff to do that knocking on doors and really understand our communities and feel rooted to them, and that is working really, really well. Mike himself has paid for the van. He's financially put his hand in the pocket to give to Cadog's Corner. So Cadog's Corner is the charity that keeps this going. But also now the van is going out, and it started 2 weeks ago for Holton Primary. So it's travelling around the streets of Holton and Barry as well.
Yeah. We mentioned about sort of silo thinking in government, but I suppose it affects each and every one of us. And I recall you were telling me once about a teacher colleague who, in doing this sort of home runs duty, saw the home conditions of some of the children, and I think he vowed he's never ever going to tell a child off for being late again from what he witnessed there. So do you think that's a sort of a valuable lesson? And as you say, it's a two-way thing. It's not about something being done to people, but people coming together and through that togetherness achieving things. Do you think that's important now?
Togetherness and everybody feeling connected and equal in a sense is what humanity is about, isn't it? And it's what schools need to be about, and it's what communities need to be about. So this philosophy of big box Bwyd enables that to happen.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, as I say, I think you're amazing. You're inspiring, the people you work with. But even you, Janet, must have your days where you get one not knocked down too much and whatever. What keeps you going? What picks you up in those sort of situations?
What keeps me going is the joy that comes from children, comes from families, comes from staff, and from making that difference. And I suppose, it sounds cliche, isn't it? I went into teaching to make a difference to the lives of children. But that's what keeps me going. And with every knockback comes a joy. And I think equally, and I can remember this quite vividly from my early days in Barry Island, driving away one day that had been an absolute delight. Everything had gone wonderfully. It was like a Disney day with the butterflies flying around. And I said to myself that this is fantastic, but just remember, tomorrow won't be like that. But equally, that the Disney days come, and those days are solid gold and are such a driver.
Fantastic. So before we move on and open up a discussion up to the room here, it would be great to get a conversation. I know one or two of you already on the chat and so on before, but just one or two things to explore before that. But do get ready and do indicate if you've got a question or engage in the conversation anyway. So looking ahead, it seems to me that you've got an incredibly powerful social franchise, which, as I say, I think makes Wales a world leader. We ask this question of every guest on Tummler School, that if you had 1 minute with the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, what would be the big change that you would ask for?
I guess the big change I would ask for is let's push aside this silo thinking. Let's think about this philosophy as an opportunity to enable change throughout all schools in Wales, because it's something tangible. It's just not an idea. It's a way of working. It's a way of enabling change, and food is a driver. So if you look at the manifesto, the Labour manifesto, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing this very well in 1 minute, but community focused schools is high on that agenda, and it hasn't been for some time. But this is a way of enabling community focused schools to really be a tangible thing that people can understand and get behind. That would be my message.
Fantastic.
Mark Drake.
And certainly, I mean, seeing what you've done at Barry Island and also the times I visited Cadoxton, as I say, I'm a great believer that many of our schools are true oasis of, you know, a better future, a better world going forward. Just one question on before I open up discussion. Victoria's asking, what was the radio station that you referenced before about hearing the drug interview?
That was BBC this morning. It was breaking news. It was breaking news on BBC this morning. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Thanks, Sarah. Right.
I'm not sure it's
Mark's added a point then. Okay, so Matt, do let me know if anyone's asking. I don't see it, but as massive food for thought there. Has anyone, let's say, any comment to make or question? Engage this conversation? Any experience? I know that, say, Jackie, with her experience at schools there, as I say, relates it to about play groups and say this reality that, you know, many of us, I'm making a presumption, many of us in this room are middle-class people, educated people, and, you know, through Janet's work and Janet's story, let's open up this wider world there. Jackie, please, welcome to the conversation, and thank you there. Where are you calling from, Jackie?
So I live in Swansea. I'm not far away from Janet at the moment. I live in Calais, so you're just down the road from me.
Right, go down.
But I work in Carmarthenshire.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I work in Carmarthenshire, although working from home over the last 16, 17 months. Mike, it was a question that I asked, actually, because schools are our community, aren't they? You know, it's where lots of people gather, parents of children gather, you know, and as we get older, potentially we start seeing people, you know, young people walking to school with bags of crisps and Mars bars and fizzy drinks. So, you know, wonderful, absolutely amazing things that you're doing, and thank you for the detail on the school in Llandilo. But I want to ask if the schools are actually open, or, you know, the school grounds that you run, are they open during holiday time for community use? And also continuation of that food side of things. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, thanks, Linda. So, Janet, over to
you. So the answer to that is yes. So both Cadoxton and Oakfield have been open for the last 2 weeks and be open next week for the SHEP project, the school holiday enrichment programme. And there's a lot of cooking and growing going on during that time. We have beds in both schools that are for families. So every class has their own beds that they tend. But
so what sort of things do they grow, Janet?
Oh gosh, well, there's a whole programme of this, Andy. So you know, potatoes and curly kale and radish seem to work really well, I would say, this year. But as well as that, you know, peas and broad beans and all sorts of different things. So the children have been making. My favourite has been radish and feta salad, actually. But obviously in the winter there are all sorts of soups being made as well. And we're looking to branch into beekeeping in September, but also chickens as well. So so that we can be selling eggs. So those are next steps. But to have school grounds now that are being not used over the 6 weeks of the summer holiday cannot be a thing. So we'll be we've planned, you know, we planned it really well this year for the first time, that what we're putting into place as schools is sustainable, so that it'll be sustainable over the holidays, but it'll keep on going as well. So a whole inquiry between the two schools of how we make this something that is part of our DNA has been something that we've worked really hard at during this last year. How we have grandparents come in as well and help work on the beds with the children has been really important. But that continues to grow our social capital as well. And intergenerational work is something that is again growing out of this philosophy.
I've got David. I'd like to join the conversation, please. Where are you calling from, David?
Hiya, I'm in Cardiff. Hopefully you can see me. I work for the Welsh Government, but I'd like to make a personal observation if I can. I mean,
Please, it's a conversation.
I was really inspired by the talk. I mean, you know, I was brought up in some quite difficult circumstances, and I really valued school because it was the one place where I could guarantee a hot meal each day, and also just to be taught by teachers, you know, who would tell me that I could be whatever I wanted to be and go on and achieve, and I found that really inspirational. I suppose my question is, with this kind of project, are you seeing the difference in those children as a result of having access to food? Are you seeing a difference in the school and in the classroom? Because, you know, I know from personal experience that those little interventions can make a life-changing difference.
Yeah.
Yes, we are, because it's a whole philosophy, isn't it? So, if first of all, you know, a hungry child is a child who can't learn, but we need our children and our families to understand how important the fuel is that we put inside us. But I think even more than that, it's that understanding that it's that appreciation that what we want for our children is the very best, but for them to understand that is what we are driven by as professionals for them. We're not doing it to them. We're enabling them to be their best by giving them the best and believing in them. And it's not an us and them, it's us together and them deserving the very best. And there's a bit of disbelief around that sometimes, you know, when parents perhaps haven't had the best experience of school themselves, but when they see that we are prepared to go the extra mile, we are prepared to make learning exciting, to get the extra resources, to send them home with the children so that children can cook meals at home as well and have the understanding of how to do that. That seems to make a huge difference. We've got a child who is the son of one of our volunteers in Cadoxton, who didn't have the easiest time perhaps in school, you know, regulating his behaviour in school to be able to learn. He was very much part of the first junk food cafe project that we ran in Cadoxton, and from that he took the idea that he wanted to be a chef. And that's going back about 4 years ago now, but I still see him. He helps out on the van, and that's really important to him, that he is still putting back in and he is still helping and part of that community. Sorry, that's my dog who's going to be quiet now. So really for him, what he talks about is how this project has kept him on the rails and understanding that he can be that person. He can be ambitious, he can be capable, he can be successful.
Can I bring Hannah into the conversation, because you mentioned her as an important team member? So Hannah, A, what's it like working with Janet, and B, what made you think of getting your dad involved in the project?
I think, as you can see from sort of the last 45 minutes, just hugely inspirational. And I think just inspires you to make that change as well. It just sort of, that dreams come true, I think. And, you know, we are big dreamers, but actually we dream for a reason, and that everything is possible. And every opportunity is possible. And I think everything we do it for a reason. We know the why we're doing it and the so what, so the impact that it's going to have. and about dad. So basically, school budgets aren't great. I think we know that within sort of an education mindset. So we do as much as we can, like Janet mentioned, to fundraise, reach out to all sort of branches, Just Giving. And one day, my dad was just sat on the sofa and I said, so what do you think about this then, Dad? He's very much really good at like managing budgets and finding out sort of alternative methods. And we knew that if we were to sort of reach out to maybe established companies, that the budget for that would be extortionate and not something that, you know, is then sustainable thereafter. So it was basically like, come and have a look, coming in. And then we never let him go again. So, yeah.
Great. Hannah, thank you so much for sharing them. Anyone else in the room before we go our separate ways? As I say, I see in the chat there's a lot of positivity about the inspiration. Matt, is there anything you'd like to ask, mate?
Yeah, I was going to ask Janet, what are the things you've learned from this process in terms of how to inspire and involve people? How you know, are there any kind of tricks and secrets that you've learned in terms of bringing people along with you on this journey?
Okay.
I suppose it's that real belief that everybody can make a difference, and it's spending time to chat with people really and to understand their why and their strengths. But when it comes to food, everybody has something, everybody has a story, and everybody understands to some extent what we're trying to do. But I think it's that belief actually that everybody has some bit of magic inside them that they are able to share and make a difference with.
Okay, so I'm conscious of time, and just like call to action, because I think again what you've both highlighted here is the power and the importance of having a dream, but it's also got to be rooted in action. So is there any sort of two or three, is there any things that anyone here today can do or call to action, and anything they can either help your cause or adapt or do in their world? What sort of steps can people take there, Janet?
Sorry, Andy, are you saying it in terms of general messages there?
Well, anyone, before we go our separate ways, what would you like people to do? So that's a better question.
Okay. I suppose first of all, just stepping back a little bit, it is that thing that I think we're too wedded to the idea of why we can't do things. So I think we've got to put that aside, and I think in schools there has been too much thinking about why we can't, and let's spend our time actually thinking about how we can, and being appreciative of what we've got. And one thing I will always say, going back to that last question, is why don't we just make it lovely? Why don't we just make it be the best it can be? And if we start with that mindset rather than having some kind of, you know, mindset that is about, you know, making do, then I think that the world looks very different. But in terms of this project and call to action, you know, for us, it is going to be about, and it's just fantastic to see somebody saying, why can't every school in Wales have one? Well, the dream is that every school in Wales will have one. We are talking to Welsh Government about that. We're also talking to people like the Co-op about that, who are keen to come into the partnership as well. So there are lots of people who are keen to help build the philosophy. Every school community can start thinking about how they can work in this way, because there is food waste and there are school grounds. But I suppose, you know, in a very practical way, if there are people on the call who want to contribute to the Cadoc's Corner giving page, Cadoc's Corner is about the people of Cadoxton, but it is about, and Hannah's just sharing it in the chat there, the Just Giving page and the overall philosophy of helping others, and that's what we want to do. So we're about our Cadoxton community, but we're about the wider school community. And as Jackie says there, she says it's not just food waste, it's about wasted space. Yeah, absolutely. And we cannot do that. But it is fantastic to see that in in the new government's manifesto, school grounds and school buildings are going to be rethought. There was a huge piece of work done by Professor Mick Waters back over way before COVID now, but it was really looking in quite a radical way as to how schools should be working. Well, I think that community focused school agenda is really a wink towards that. And of course the summer of fun is happening in schools in Wales at the moment. So once we finish for SHEP over the first 3 weeks, we will be continuing as well. It's on for the full 6 weeks for all children in Barry, summer of fun in our sports hall. So schools have to be living, breathing places for the full 52 weeks, maybe a day off for Christmas.
Janet, I say absolutely breathless here in terms of sharing an inspiring story coming from a really amazing, wonderful person who I've had the privilege of knowing and working with, and will continue to do my utmost to help you in your dreams, and I hope everyone joins me in that support there. So if you could put in the chat any comments, any appreciation, that would also be welcome. And do follow up on the links shared there, and do look out for Tummler School, which so we'll be reappearing again in the autumn, and we'll be announcing the program within the next few weeks there. So massive thank you. Have a great summer wherever you are in the world and whatever you do, and let's keep in touch, let's grow together, and let's make that difference. So thank you again there. Well, I'm still going to be around for a few more minutes, Janet. If anyone wants to have a little natter, we're here for that as well. So massive thank you for everyone, and massive thank you to Janet again there. Thank you.